Hello and welcome to Retro Racing Reviews, where this time out we're going to be taking a look at the Tyrrell P34, the so far only six-wheeled car to run in the F1 World Championship, and it raced between 1976 and 1977. Now you might notice this isn't the Tyrrell P34, this is actually the predecessor to that car. That's the Tyrrell 007. This is the car that was introduced originally in 1974 and raced in 74 and 75, driven by Jody Scheckter, who you see at the wheel. Now, Tyrrell had come off the back of considerable amount of Grand Prix success in the late 60s and early 1970s, with Jackie Stewart at the helm of the early succession of Tyrrell F1 cars. And after Francois Cervera was killed at Watkins Glen in 1973, and Stewart retired when the team withdrew from the race, this is what they came up with a couple of rookie drivers, Jody Scheckter and Patrick Depailler, for that for the next season in 1974. So what you had at this stage was a pretty conventional car, looking very similar to things like the McLaren M23, the Lotus 72. You can very much see through the angular design and everything else that most teams were kind of trying to copy what what Colin Chapman was doing at the time. So personally, I think this design looks excellent. The colour scheme, Tyrrell was sponsored by Elf throughout those years. It really does make it look pretty special for a race car. Had the massive air dam up at the top, which they got rid of at the sort of in the mid 70s. I'm not quite sure why they did it, but by the time you got to 1976, you had things like some side air boxes on the McLaren, whereas in 74 this also had the big air scoop when Fittipaldi won the title in that car. So we're going around Brands Hatch just to give you an idea of how this car goes, and to be honest with you, I like it. It's an enjoyable drive. It's nothing spectacular, but it hangs on well. It's a nice tidy car. Won some races in the hands of Scheckter and placed well pretty much everywhere. By the end of the 74 season, certainly, he went into the last round with a shot at the title, but Fittipaldi ended up winning out in that regard. By 1975, Lauda and the Ferrari were just bossing things. So overall, there wasn't really much scope to get much in the way of additional wins. Now, late in 1975, this thing comes along, and here's where you see the genius of the P34 in action. 6 wheels, 4 of them at the front doing the steering, and quite frankly at the time this thing was revolutionary. Unfortunately, the onboard cameras aren't quite as good as the ones for the 007. Still Scheckter at the helm, by the way, but just look at that thing. Obviously, the massive rear tyres that were a common feature of that era, but 4 itty bitty little front wheels doing the driving. Now, the whole idea behind this car was that one of the things you have to work out when driving it is it's so much wider at the rear. So even though you're placing the front wheels, it can be a case of the rear ones are running off the track. But the idea was that the front air dam of the car could only be a certain width. And at the time, the idea was to have the front air dam deflect the air over the top of the front of the car. So what Tyrrell thought was, if they had smaller wheels, then they could actually run them closer into the side of the car and therefore reduce drag, whilst still benefiting from all the downforce. So what they worked out was that 10-inch wheels were the way to go, but that made the car hopelessly undrivable at the front, simply because there wasn't enough grip and braking power from wheels that small. So they decided to run 4 of them, obviously, as you can see there, really close into the chassis, and the wheels right at the front were the ones that were connected to the steering column. The wheels behind were sort of slaved to them, and then everything was connected up to the brakes. So the idea was you get 4 tyres at the front with the braking, everything was going to be steering, and you had overall a better aerodynamic profile. So this was the sort of the plan, effectively. Now, as a piece of engineering to get this whole thing to work was pretty remarkable in and of itself, and certainly to drive, it's lovely. It feels really well planted, really, a really agile car. It's quick, definitely feels quick. Now, I'm driving in rFactor, so I mean all of this stuff is modelled by fans, for fans, but you get the sense with this car that it's something that if you were to go back and just play this game for a long stretch of time, run a championship with this, you pick this just because it's one of those iconic racing cars of all time. Now, I'm going around the Catalunya circuit here at Barcelona, and it's the old version without the stupid chicane at the end, because quite frankly that was just a nonsense. But I mean, when you look at the car from the outside, it just looks like nothing else you've ever seen, to be honest with you. Again, it was Scheckter and Dupaille in the car this year, and it was very much the case that these cars were pretty competitive. So I mean, so much so that in the Swedish Grand Prix, Scheckter did take the win and placed well throughout the rest of the season. I mean, he scored second place in Monaco, in Great Britain, in Germany, and in the US. Now, obviously, nobody really focused too much on this car for the title per se. But obviously, Scheckter did do pretty well in the title standings overall. Dupaille less so, but he still placed second in Sweden, where the car took the 1-2. France, Canada, and Japan. Again, you had a couple of really good drivers driving a pretty excellent car, all told. All of the Tyrrells, I mean, going all the way through to the early to mid 80s, were powered by the Ford Cosworth DFE engine, which at the time was the thing to have. The DFE was, Tyrrell were actually the last team to use the DFE in the 1984 season, which they got disqualified from for various reasons of skullduggery on both sides of the divide. But the team upgraded the car for the 1977 season, and this is where things started to go a little bit awry. Now, they changed the driver lineup. Scheckter went off to drive for the Wolf team. That's a whole story for another day. And he was replaced by Ronnie Peterson. Now, I might have mentioned Ronnie Peterson previously, but he came into prominence driving for March with the T-tray front wing March in the early 1970s. He moved on to Lotus and became synonymous with the Lotus 72, but never scored championship success with the car. His teammate Emerson Fittipaldi did in 72, but Peterson never quite managed it, and he left Lotus after the 72 lost competitiveness and came on board for '77. So the problem with the car was, by this stage, that they'd had to redesign it a bit. Peterson was a bigger driver, and so they had to do a bit of a redesign to get him comfortable in the car. Also, the fact that because Goodyear were only building one set of tyres to fit this car, and they had their normal sized front tyres for everybody else, they were split in terms of what they were going to do in terms of developing tyres for this, tyres for their regular customers, and it transpired that they did skimp on development as the season progressed, so the car slowly lost competitiveness in that regard because it just didn't quite have the leading edge in terms of development. The other thing was, with the redesigns, the car was now heavier than it was the previous season and significantly over the minimum weight, which meant that the engine, being no different really from anybody else, was starting to really struggle to throw the thing forward at quite the same speed. Now I get it a little bit wrong here, taking it a bit too fast, kept my foot in it. If that was real life rather than a video game, I think I might have been somewhat all over the landscape there. But this version of the P34B, it does look absolutely fantastic. I mean, I know it wasn't quite as competitive. I mean, its best results came near the end of the season, where DePino scored a second and third in the last two rounds. But I have to say, it does look better, and it is something that, whichever version of the car you look at, it's an iconic thing, and quite frankly, we'll never see the like again, because the regulations nowadays are so tightly controlled that they just won't invent anything along these lines. I mean, the best we get now is the double diffuser. Apparently that's revolutionary. No, this was revolutionary. This was between this and the fan car and you name it, ground effect, turbocharged engines. Grand Prix racing was a hotbed of ingenuity. Now let's just see if I can get this little sort of chicane thing right this time. There we go. Take it a bit tighter. Power my way through. Now we're going around Zandvoort because one of the things this car had was very benign handling. It was very good to drive. I mean, even with the tyres not quite being up to scratch, it still drove incredibly well. And I'm kind of coming into this quite cold, to be honest with you. I'm just sort of jumping into these cars, throwing them around for a few laps, and seeing how I get on. But otherwise, I'm enjoying it quite a lot. Now this is Tarzan Corner. One of the reasons I picked this track is because some of the crazy banking that you get. It's a fabulous track, Zandvoort. I mean, there's lots and lots of just really nice cambered corners that if you get it right, it's just like a roller coaster. You just throw yourself round. So barreling in here at high speed, and I'll just throw it left, dab off the throttle, throw it in, run a little bit wide, bring it back round, and then back into this. I mean, this is really bumpy. It's difficult to get to grips with as I pirouette away. So after the end of the '77 season, they reverted to a more conventional design, should we put it? And this was it. This was the car that marked the end of the six-wheeled era, the Tyrrell 008. They went back to their conventional numbering scheme, I should say. The P34 was Project 34. That was the code name for it. All the previous Tyrrells had just been sort of 001, 002, etc., with sort of A spec and B spec depending on when in the season things went. For for this season. You had well, the car was good but not great, and really from the end of the 70s, you saw Tyrrell slipping back down the grid, only really making a re-emergence with the advent of Jean Lazy in the early 1990s. I intend to do a full history on Tyrrell at some stage in the not too distant future, because as a team it was a fascinating history, and shame that they're not with us any longer. But hopefully this sort of quick lap around the A1 ring gives you a show of one of their, probably one of their last really good cars. At the final corner, down the main straight, and that's the end. If you like the video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.